To begin your curved seam that has been graded, clipped, and pressed sample, you're going to take 2 pieces of cotton woven fabric and press them flat. Next, you're going to use a straight ruler to mark 1/2 inch on 2 sides of the fabric. After you've done this, you're going to grab a fashion curve, a curve ruler, or just eyeball to connect the 2 lines together to make a curve shape. This can be any curve that you would like. Next, using the crosshairs of the 1/2 inch point, you are going to mark a new seam allowance of 1/2 inch around the curve. After you've done this in a few spots, use your scissors to clip the curve and then head on over to your sewing machine. At the sewing machine, you will begin your sample with a back stitch, straight stitch, and then once you get to the curve, it's helpful to lower the presser foot or the needle down into the fabric, lift the presser foot, take a few stitches, and then continue to do this until you've gotten around the curve. Eventually, you'll be able to easily go around curves without having to raise and lower the presser foot. And then once you get to the straight point, just go for it and end with a back stitch. Clip your threads and head back over to the ironing table with your pair of scissors. Now we're going to press the 2 layers apart, and it gets a little bit tricky around the curves, but don't worry too much about it quite yet. This is just for our step of grading. Now, grading is something that you do when you have bulky seam allowances, and it's often done with thicker fabric. So here what we're going to do is we're going to trim 1 layer of the fabric down to 1/4 inch of seam allowance. You can again just eyeball this, or if you'd like, you can mark 1/4 inch away from your stitch line. Once you've clipped all the way around here, you will have reduced the bulk in half by most of the seam allowance. This might not make a ton of sense with this lightweight fabric, but when you're dealing with something heavier and you want the curve to press and lay flat, you often will have to grade or trim down one of the seam allowances. Once you've done that, it's easiest if you press the curve flat, because now we are going to clip our corners. In addition to doing the grading, we need to clip the corners so that when we press this flat, the bulk of the fabric from the curve doesn't cause a lot of bunching. You can do this one of 2 ways. You can do the pie cuts like I've done, or just a simple slice like that last stitch I did. Next, you can either use a ham or a sausage, and you are going to place that on to the curve, hold the fabric tight across it, and then start to press the fabric so that the seam allowance is going one direction. I like to have it so that the smaller seam allowance is kind of covered up by the larger seam allowance, but either way is just fine. Next, you're going to turn the fabric right side out, and you're going to press it so both of the seams on both sides are flush. Sometimes you have to wiggle around with this a little bit more, come back in with the sausage roll or the ham to make sure that you can get into those corners, and sometimes you might even need to clip your curves a little bit more. Once that is pressed flat, you have completed your curved seam that has been graded and pressed.